Hopefully you can see that. So thank you for joining us for the last session of what I think has been a fantastic network event so far, so no pressure. So firstly, for those who don't know me, I'm Gemma Finlay-Gray and I'm one of the Strategic Relationship Managers at Active Sussex. I'll be facilitating the proceedings for this session and I'll be supported by my colleague Carrie Smith, who's our PR and Communications Officer. Carrie will also be keeping an eye on the chat box, so feedback, questions where possible. So the purpose of this session is to try and provide an opportunity to take on board the insight around engaging women and girls, hear from some of our new fantastic champions and their physically active journey, and get some thoughts from our ambassadors as they answer your pre-requested questions, and to provide some time to reflect on all of these learnings and how they can be implemented locally, and hopefully how the new This Girl Can Sussex network can support that, which I'm pleased to announce is officially from today. So the new network aims to create a positive movement to inspire women and girls to get active in the county. We're utilising the Sport England This Girl Can campaign and ethos. And to help us achieve this aim, we put a call out to people to get involved as a promoter or a champion. And we've been absolutely overwhelmed by the response of those wishing to be a champion. The stories that we've received, some of them are truly inspiring, and how women are looking to get active or play sport in the way that is right for them. And I'm really pleased that we'll be able to announce some of these new champions today, along with hearing from 4 of them a little later on. So we are obviously delighted that we have had an overwhelming response, but because of this, we have also decided to take a bit of a phased approach to bringing on future champions. So over the next year, we will introduce more. And we are especially excited to bring a cohort of those from the education sector, who I think will be really fundamental to focus on teenage girls and girls in those transition years through education. And I really understand the barriers and the motivations that can influence a young female's relationship with physical activity and sport. So I really encourage some of the fantastic conversations from session 3 earlier in today, if you joined us then, to continue here in our discussion groups. So without further ado, as I'm sure you're all interested to hear from our fantastic guest speakers, I'm thrilled to introduce Kate Dale, Strategic Lead for Campaigns at Sport England. And she'll then be followed by Liz Prinz, who is the Insight Manager at Women in Sport. After both presentations, we will have about 5 minutes for a Q&A. So please use the chat function to post any of these questions. We will do our best to answer as many as possible, and Carrie will feed those questions back to Kate and Liz. So over to you, Kate. You unmute yourself.
You would think by now. Hello, everybody. A year of unmuting myself and muting myself. Thank you very much for letting me come and talk to you all today. I'm sure it's been a fantastic day so far, and hopefully you're not too exhausted as we just go into this final session. It's really exciting to be here at the start of the network, because we know that the thing that really makes a difference, we can do all this work nationally, we can create all this material, and that has its challenges, but it's relatively straightforward compared to actually getting down to make a difference on the ground. And so connecting the work that we're doing, sort of at that, creating the material, the films, the national level, down to what you guys are doing, and making sure that you have everything you need to really be able to help change women's lives, really, because that's what it comes down to. It's a fantastic opportunity. Do I just say next slide, please, in manner of, as we've all learned to do, as well as meeting, so next slide, please. Yeah, so This Girl Can, 6 years old in January, which means I've been working on it for over 7 years now, I think, since you first started doing the Insight. Our objectives then and our objectives now stay the same. It's the very obvious one about getting the number of women, increasing the number of women who are regularly active. As you'll know, that's 150 minutes moderate intensity activity a week, which is never as terrifying as it sounds when you realise that you can divide that into small chunks. It doesn't have to be anything formal. It can be if you want to be, and that's great, but it can be as simple as dancing around the living room to your favourite tunes, or going for a walk or a run, as we've all had to adapt to over the last few months. But it's not just about the actual behaviour, it's about how we're thinking and feeling about it too. So really increasing women's confidence about getting active, measured by the changes in the number of women who agree with statements as see here, like, I don't care what others think about me, or I see women like me getting active. And that's because when we first looked at the insight behind the gender gap in female-male participation, we saw a lot of emotional and mental barriers that were making women feel that they couldn't take part, or that women like them just didn't belong them. So throughout the campaign, from the very beginning until now, a lot of what we're doing is trying to show that everyone belongs there, everyone can feel welcome, and the way that you get active just needs to be right for you. It doesn't really matter what anybody else thinks. And a huge part of this as well, therefore, is really helping the sector adapt and change as well, because it's behaviour change for them as well as us women. To be honest, so helping better able meet the needs of women and girls, and not try and force us into the maybe more sort of one size fits all approach to sport or physical activity, and not say that you only have to do it in a certain way, wear certain clothing, or be going after one particular motivation, which traditionally is the way a lot of sport was packaged to us. Certainly when I think back to my school days, when it was about competitive team sport, and if you couldn't do that, and I really, really couldn't do that, then there wasn't a lot of point in you trying to do anything. Next slide, please. So, and with the way we've done that, hopefully the fact that you're here today and interested in becoming, finding out more about it, means that you're very aware of all the creative material that we've produced over 6 years, from our initial film with Missy Elliott that burst onto screens in the middle of Coronation Street back in 2015, through to billboards across the country, all our PR stories and media coverage, the social media we've done. This is one of our posters from last year, one of my favourites actually, which is absolutely, I think for me, sums up what This Girl Can is about. It makes me absolutely long to get back in the pool, and regret all the times that I felt I couldn't be bothered going to swimming, because I could always go swimming tomorrow. But then all of a sudden from March last year, tomorrow we couldn't go swimming. So I'm really excited about those coming back shortly. And we know that swimming is really important activity for lots and lots of women. But I think the attitude behind this as well, this is Glynis, who's one of the women we streetcast. All the women who feature in the campaign are streetcast. They're everyday women doing the activities that they normally do. Nothing's fake, nothing's real. And that authenticity, nothing's real, nothing's not real. That authenticity is really keen. And in the work that the champions are doing as well, talking about what you're doing, just what you're naturally doing, not having to make anything artificial or contrived, is really important. And the attitude that Glynis has about enjoying swimming just in the way that's right for her. And when you watch her content film, she talks about the fun, the confidence, how it reminds her of something that she used to do as a child, and really inclusive and inviting people into the conversation, not making we include everybody. We don't necessarily make a point of their differences, but everybody is there, no matter who they are, what they are. As we say in our manifesto for This Girl Can, all shapes, sizes, backgrounds, abilities. The important thing is you're a woman and you're doing something, and that's all that you need to do to be part of This Girl Can. Next slide, please. That inclusivity, warmth, loveliness is very important, but it's also important that we tackle the taboos. And if any of you saw the coverage or saw the film, the Me Again film that we launched last January, you may have seen the infamous tampon string that we deliberately featured as part of that as well. And that was deliberate for two reasons. We need to keep finding the taboos and the things that are holding women back. And there is so much research that shows that there are huge numbers of women and girls who don't feel comfortable getting active during their periods. And who feel that that's time of the, literally time of the month metaphorically, but the time in the month where they almost have to step away. And we hear women talking about how they're reluctant to even engage in social activities during that time because of the inconvenience, what about leaking, all sorts of things. But there's something in that as well that speaks to just being uncomfortable about the natural functions of our own bodies. And so we really wanted to tackle that in a very visible way. And that visibility is a very important part of This Girl Can. We don't all have to go out, and I'm not saying you will have to do this, but but really being visible about the reality of getting active, the reality of being a woman, and the reality of what it looks like, as opposed to something stylized, glossed over, filtered, and not reflecting reality, is really important. And it's also important, and then it gets people talking. And some of the response to this was really interesting, even amongst women who would describe themselves as feminists and would be really comfortable with this sort of thing. The fact that we were one of the first ads that showed a period product outside of period product advertising was really quite challenging to some women. But I think it's in the conversation about why that is that you start to really get to some of the surface, some of the fears, the things that maybe we didn't even think we were feeling, if that makes sense. And some of the conversations we watched coming out of this on social media were really interesting. There was one on Mumsnet where they started off talking about how they felt about this. Some didn't mind it, some hated it, whatever. But it then got into people talking about playing sport at school, how they felt about getting active. And it actually became a conversation about what they could do to get active in a very uncontrived and manipulated way by us, but it just got women talking. And it's in those conversations and creating conversations about all aspects of being a woman, of getting active, of how we feel about that. That is where change can happen. Next slide, please. But we can't do it on our own. So there's lots of things that Sport England has done through working with other organisations. On the 8th of March for International Women's Day last year, we joined forces with Parkrun to celebrate women, and we've got 10,000 more women taking part in Parkrun, which was fantastic. It's the second last Parkrun of the year, which was really unfortunate, but we'll be bringing back some memories of that in a week or two as part of this year's International Women's Day. We're doing some work with PA Media and the imagery that's being used to create more images that anyone can use for free that just show everyday women getting active in normal ways. And with all our images, and this is really important, we don't use filters, we don't use photoshopping, we don't airbrush out any flaws, using air quotes. You can see me, but using flaws, because we don't have flaws. We're just women and we're fabulous. So we don't need to be airbrushed, thank you very much. And that's a really important part of it too. And also by opening up through our community fund, money that can help if women who've got great ideas of activity, things that they can do on the ground that they can apply for. So some quite small levels of funding can make a huge difference, and just really trying to open it up. And one of the changes that we're really aware of is, having started out as an advertising-led campaign, we are increasingly becoming a partnership-led movement. And that word movement, and it's such a wonderful word because it works both ways, right? It's about moving more, but it's all about us all coming together in quite a loose way, in quite an unstructured way, but all with that goal of helping more women, more girls feel that they can get active in the ways that work for them. And that is really the direction that we're looking at this year. It's much, it can feel quite messy, to be honest, because it means I can't sit here and tell you exactly what the next 12 months are going to look like, because we don't know. We want to work in collaboration with all of you. And that really fits in with our new with Sport England's new strategy, which I think I go on to on the next slide. I'm trying to remember. The next slide, please. No, not quite yet, sorry. So just a reminder of where we were before COVID-19. So all of the things that we were doing with this Girl Can ourselves and with our partners were making an impact. It was working. Before, in November 2019, with the figures released in Active Lives then, which is Sport England's big survey with results released twice a year of physical activity, we were seeing record numbers of women and girls getting active. The numbers were going up. And actually women were really driving the overall upward increase in participation. So it was fantastic. And then next slide, please. And then 2020 arrived. And yeah, you don't need to talk to me to talk to you about last year. We all know we're still living it, to be honest. This feels like still coming to the end of it, hopefully now, but like the 14th month of 2020 rather than the second month of 2021. We are seeing, and we have seen from the Active Lives figures released in November, we're seeing the biggest falls in participation amongst men and women that we've ever seen, and hopefully ever will see. It's not just about the closure of facilities and the restriction of choice, but we know how it's making us all feel. And I think particularly this third lockdown, we have all felt, I think, don't like to generalise, but I think we can on this, the lethargy, the anxiety, the practical impacts of COVID-19 are impacting women's lives, and we still haven't got to the full realisation of what those protracted increased care burdens, financial insecurity will be. And we know from countries coming out of lockdown ahead of us, Australia being a classic example of that, that it really isn't just about unlocking those doors and turning the heating back on the pool. There's going to be a lot of reassurance and encouragement to encourage women to return, to get over the fear and the new patterns of behaviour that we've had long enough to develop now. It does feel weird, or it will feel weird, exercising in public, exercising around more than a few people, or just at the moment one person, and maybe just being a bit more relaxed about it. And when you think that this Girl Can has always been about those emotional and mental barriers, then we have all the existing fear of judgment that we've always had, and that this Girl Can has always spoken to, and I can talk about in much more detail if people would like to. I can talk for hours about this Girl Can. I'm trying to keep it short today, but we've got new ones that are going to be added in there. So as we start planning the year ahead and thinking about the months and looking forward through the roadmap that has been released this week, and thinking about what this year could start to feel like and how exciting that is. I cannot wait to jump in that pool. We also know that there's an awful lot that we're going to have to do to make sure that everyone can feel that they can go back, and also use this as a real opportunity to welcome new women in. Although this Girl Can has reached 4 million women and encouraged them to get active, there's still a lot of women it hasn't reached. And so we want to really use this disruption, this horrendous year we've had, this return to something like normality, or for it to be a new normality, I guess, and that real reinvention. What else can we be doing? Let's use this as a reset moment. Next slide, please. I will speed up because I'm already taking too long. And this is where it ties in with Supporting the strategy that was announced at the end of January, 10-year vision. And we have a real focus now as an organisation on making sure that everyone has the opportunity, inspiration and freedom to get moving. Moving is a word you'll hear us talk about far, far more. Next slide. We've classic public sector brought it together with a nice model. And this shows all the things that we're looking at. And although women aren't specifically mentioned in all of this, tackling inequalities and the gender gap within that will be fundamental to all the things that we are doing to really make sure that everyone feels able to get to move more and to get involved in moving more and get involved in being active. Collaboration is going to be absolutely critical. We absolutely cannot do that on our own. So talking to partners, understanding what Support England needs to do, what this Girl Can needs to be there to do to support your work is going to be as critical, if not more critical, than us deciding what we think that we need to do. It's back to the insight to understand the audiences, what they need to hear from us, breaking those audiences down, because women are not one homogenous group, obviously, and really properly understanding what it is that needs to make a difference, so that we can talk about campaigning and messages, but also the funding that's needed, the opportunities that are needed, the workforce development that's needed, all the different aspects that come together to make everyone feel able to get active. I can't remember my next slide, sorry. Next slide, please. Yeah, because we know that behaviour change is driven by lots and lots and lots of different factors, and that's what this slide really brings to life, is lots of things that will make an impact on what you as an individual are going to do. So if I'm trying to get you to do something, I have to remember that, yes, I can talk to you directly, but you've got all these other pressures going on you, going and affecting you and influencing what you do. So the more we can connect through those, and the more we can make sure all of those are supporting the change that we're trying to bring in, the bigger a difference we are likely to make. Next slide. Because behaviour change is not a linear process. This is loosely based on something called the trans-theoretical model of behaviour change, which is a line that shows how people move from pre-contemplation, when you didn't even know about something, through to thinking about it, planning it, taking the action, and it could be anything: activity, quitting smoking, tidying up your room, whatever, to doing it and maintaining it. Much harder for me when it comes to keeping my room tidy. It's not a straight line. We go forwards, we go back, we go up and down. There are hurdles and blocks, and sometimes we might skip a stage, and that will be unique for everyone. So we need to make sure that through all the work that all of us are doing, that it is reaching women in lots of different ways and really keeping them motivated, so that whether they move forward or back, whether they stop, whether it becomes harder than they thought it was, that they still feel able to eventually move forward and stay moving forward. More theory, sorry, it's all very theoretical, but the Combi model, which really also sort of speaks to this as well, is it's not just enough to have the facilities and opportunities. So if I want to put on a 5k run, it's not just about putting on that 5k run and creating all the things to make that happen. I need to make sure that people want to take part, that women want to take part, feel able to take part, and think it's worth it, and think it's going to have an impact on them and something that they would like to do and is appealing. And that needs to come from their needs and what they're thinking and feeling, not what I think they should be thinking and feeling. And the same with capability. It needs to be something they can do, they are physically able to do, and something they feel physically able to do. So the broadening out of what it is to be active, the demystifying it, the showing that it doesn't have to be in lycra, it doesn't have to be about personal best and pushing yourself and shuttle runs till you vomit or whatever. It can be if you want, that's up to you, but it doesn't have to be about. That's really important in our messaging too. Next slide, please. So as we plan for this year, that working together to further understand who we can reach, how we can support more women, and what we can do. But we are doing long-term planning with that, and we'll be talking to lots of organisations, lots of people, and gathering evidence, ideas, insights. So talk to us. If you've got ideas, please get in touch and talk to us. But obviously the day-to-day work doesn't stop. So we will continue with all our online advice, support, communities, opportunities, activation, sharing those. Around International Women's Day in a couple of weeks, less than a couple of weeks now, we'll be sharing and celebrating lots of women getting active. probably May, June, but the timing of this is TBC because it will depend how that roadmap out of lockdown happens. We might push it back. We'll be doing some paid media around that, so you'll see more visible messaging, and the theming of that is not quite sure what it will be, but it will tie into this sort of the great unlock, I think I heard it being called. However that manifests, it will tie into that, and that feeling of at least some sort of normality coming back in. And then September always was a big moment for this Girl Can. It's that back to school moment where particularly mothers, but lots of us, even those of us like me who don't have kids, have that new school year feeling. You never quite lose that. This September, that is probably going to be the biggest ever, hopefully, if things keep going as they're going, touching wood with pandemic. So thinking about how we can do that, we'll be shaping that too. Thank you. I think, is that my final slide, Gemma? Have I got one more? Yeah. Sorry. No. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate. That was great. So now I would like to introduce Liz Prinz.
Thanks very much, Gemma. I am hoping you can hear me. Excellent. Okay, so yeah, my name is Liz Prinz and I'm an Insight Manager at Women in Sport. Kate's actually set up a lot of what I'm going to say, so I'll try to do a bit of a skip through this presentation. For those of you who don't know, Women in Sport is an organization that was set up in 1984 to research the needs of women and girls specifically in terms of sport and exercise. And if you haven't visited our website, I do recommend you have a look. It's womeninsport.org, because we've got tons of research looking at women's and girls' experiences of sport and exercise. You could go ahead. Yep, perfect. Thank you. You preempted me. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is, frankly, that not enough women and girls are taking part in exercise and sport, as Kate has highlighted already, but also that they're not enjoying it. So if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. I won't belabor this point too much, but these are the latest figures from Sport England Active Lives, of which Kate very helpfully showed that progression. And you can see here that there's actually a 5.5% gap between girls and boys and a 3.3% gap between men and women in terms of participation. And this is actually a smaller gap than usual because while men and women have both seen a decrease in participation since the pandemic started, men and boys have actually seen a larger decrease. So actually this is smaller than the gap usually is. So it's still there, unfortunately. In terms of sort of the reasons behind this, I've pulled a couple of quotes from our research. Thank you, Gemma. Just to highlight a couple of the reasons why women and girls tell us that they aren't able to be active. And the first one here is all about time. I apologize for the barking dog in the background, by the way. So having children is often the time when women tell us that that is when they stop being able to prioritize themselves. Life becomes very, very busy. Women pretty commonly now go back to work after their maternity leave, so they're juggling lots of different things. And so as you can see from this quote here, just finding the time to be active is really difficult. If you could do the next quote, thank you. This quote is actually from a teenage girl in the teenage research we did a couple of years ago, but I think it applies equally to women as well. And it's about being embarrassed or ashamed. And we hear from so many women that they are embarrassed to be active, to be seen publicly being active. And that might be, you know, because they don't know the rules of a sport and so they feel a bit clueless. It might be because, as Kate was saying, you know, they don't have a body that looks like everyone else's, or it might just be that they're not as good as everyone else out there and they're just really worried about looking foolish and how that will impact on them. And then the last quote is, finding something that they want to do. So women tell us quite often that, you know, they're just not motivated by the opportunities that they see. And importantly, quite often women have a very narrow view of what is available to them in terms of activities. And so it's really important that we expand their perceptions of what they can do so that they can find something they enjoy. Next slide, please. So on that note of enjoyment, we recently did a survey with 1,500 teenage girls around the country, and we asked them about sport and exercise before the pandemic. And the younger end of the girls, the 12 to 15-year-olds, actually 52% of them told us they loved doing sport and exercise before the pandemic, which isn't as high as we'd like, but it could be worse. But then if you could hit the Next graphic, thank you. When it got to 16 to 18-year-olds, actually that dropped to 39%. So only 39% of those girls were enjoying sport and activity before the pandemic. And then again, using the Sport England Active Lives data, we see that only 27% of adult women enjoy sport and physical activity, and that's compared to 36% of men. So it's not really a surprise to hear that women aren't that motivated to get active if this few women and girls enjoy it in the first place. Next slide. Thank you. As Kate alluded to, though, we cannot think of women and girls as sort of a monolithic group. You know, they have different needs based on age, based on their experience of sport, based on a whole range of things. So at Women in Sport, we like to refer to a spectrum of engagement. And what this essentially means is that, you know, you have some women who've loved physical activity from the time they were really young. They've created a habit out of it. They've taken part often. So they're on one side of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, you have women who are who maybe had a negative experience in school. They've never really liked being active. They've never been able to sort of establish a habit, and they've maybe done some activity but never really found something that they enjoyed. And then you have women who fall somewhere in the middle. And these might be women who, you know, have children and then find it really hard to prioritize time for themselves, even if they liked being active before when they had more time, or a whole range of other places that women can fall on that spectrum. So it's just important to keep that in mind, is that women are not a monolith, obviously. And there's also a larger point that's being made on this slide, which we call the game of life, which is, you know, why do we talk about women and girls differently than men and boys? And that's, to state the obvious, because they're different. Physiologically, obviously, men and women are different, but also in terms of the sort of social expectations and norms that we all sort of take in from day one. And I wanted to start on that side with the primary girls, talking about those gender stereotypes that we see girls taking in from a very young age. And when it comes to sport and exercise, it's really clear that girls are getting the message that sport is not for them. And there are myriad examples of this. I think two that I like to give are, one, if you look at school uniform shoes for girls and boys from a very young age, mostly boys' shoes have a good tread on them. They have a thick sole. They're good for running around. But if you look at girls' shoes, they're shiny, they're pretty, they're very thin-soled, they probably don't have much of a tread on them, so you run around and you slip and you fall. So that's just one example of sending a really clear message that boys are meant to run around and girls are not. And another example that I like to give of this is a study that was done a few years ago now on a playground where a fire pole that you would find in a fire station, you know, for sliding up, for sliding down, was put on a playground, and parents were observed about how they treated girls versus boys. And girls were told, you know, be careful. I don't know if you should go on that. It's risky. Boys were told, you know, get on that. It looks fun. Go on. You know, don't be a wuss, that kind of thing. So again, very clear messages sent from a really young age. And I find this statistic on the Game of Life slide about 42% of girls aged 7 to 10 thinking boys are better at being strong is a particularly depressing statement. So from a really young age, girls are being told sport and exercise and being strong, not for you. And then we get into the teenage years. And during the teenage years, obviously, girls are going through puberty. They're going through a lot of emotional and physical changes. They're dealing with periods for the first time. And I think that embarrassment around periods that Kate was talking about is really heightened when you're a teenager because you're learning how to cope with it for the first time. And they're also potentially dealing with, at the same time, the transition from primary to secondary school. So all of this can really come together and sort of seep away girls' confidence. And that, you know, when they don't have the confidence, then they're less likely to want to do things that are maybe a bit more publicly facing, like sport. And this is especially true for those girls who aren't the best on the team. So I think here the really depressing stat from some Procter & Gamble research is that 64% of girls will have quit sport by the time they finish puberty. So we're sort of heading into adulthood. We're already looking at a difficult landscape for girls. I won't go too much into many of the rest of these for reasons of time, but I think, you know, we've talked about time to prioritize yourself, which comes in adulthood, and I really do want to spend just a minute talking about menopause, because we've just done some research with inactive women going through menopause, and I saw during Kate's presentation a number of you were commenting on the experiences of women during perimenopause and menopause, and I think it's an ignored area that we really need to pay more attention to as a sector. So, I mean, during menopause, what we found is that, you know, this is when women are maybe still having kids at home, because women have started having kids later in the past few decades, more likely to be working as well. Many more women are working into later life now than they used to, so they're balancing a full or part-time job, and they might be dealing with or helping with parents who are starting to have health issues and need more caring work. So it's what I like to say is the busiest time of women's life, chances are. And then you throw on top of this emotional and physical and mental experience of menopause and perimenopause that lasts for years for most women and can be pretty easy, but also can be really debilitating. You know, we talk about hot flushes and disrupted sleep, but also brain fog, low confidence, being on edge all the time, anxiety and depression. I mean, all kinds of things that can really cause women a lot of problems. And so you then say, oh, well, you know, come on and get active again. And the women are sort of like, with what energy? You know, what energy do I have left to do this? And they're also starting to worry about injuries during this time, you know, especially because of menopause. Bones are starting to become weaker because you're losing your estrogen. But also just generally as you age, you know, the average age of menopause is 51. As you age, you acquire injuries, health issues become more common. And so, you know, this concern, as well as all of these things these women are coping with, is really a big barrier to returning to activity or even getting active for the first time. But we think that it's so important to help women during this time to get active, because as they move into that later life period, they start to lose the ability. You know, the more injuries you have, the more illnesses you have, the harder it's going to be to get back into that habit of physical activity. So even though menopause is this difficult time for a lot of women, we do think it's a time for opportunity as well, a time for them to get active and to carry that activity into later life. I'm sorry, I get on my soapbox quite a lot about menopause, I'm afraid, because I do think it is just an overlooked area. So I'll just go to one more slide and then I'll call it quits. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, what we do, what our responsibility is as a sector. And I think you all will be very aware of this as a sector and as people who work with girls and women every day. So I think that there are three things we need to do. If you could just click once more, Gemma. Perfect. And these are reframe, redefine, and reinforce. And when we think about these, I think it's important to go back to that spectrum of engagement and think about who we're talking about. So for women who've never been particularly excited by sport, reframing is what we really need to be doing. We need to reframe sport as something that can inspire and motivate them. And we need to find opportunities for them that don't look like maybe the negative experience they had in school. You know, it's not just those team sports and that's all you get. We also need to redefine their experiences. So they need to be broader and better than what they've experienced before. I'm hearing big stool ball tournaments. I mean, that sounds brilliant, but there's so many sports out there that women just don't know about. And we need to be giving them a clear idea of what's out there. And I think especially those sports that not a lot of people play, give everyone a sort of a baseline to start from. Because if you've not really played sport before, going into a place where everyone knows what they're doing already is really intimidating. And then the last bit is thinking about those women who might have fallen out of an activity or having trouble prioritizing themselves. That's where we need to reinforce the enjoyment of sport and physical activity, but also the real value that it can add to their lives. You know, you can be a more supportive mother, you know, if your mind is free and if you've had that time to yourself, to have that sort of mental space for yourself. And there are all kinds of values like that that sport can bring to the rest of your life. So I'll stop there for sake of time. Thank you very much. And there's just a couple of ideas, but I won't go through them for sake of time.
Thank you so much. Thanks for both of your times. I think that was a really fantastic insight into, yeah, the campaign, and then the insight that sits behind it, and then also the insight that's coming out. I don't think we had many questions that might have been already addressed. If there are, we are going to pick that up at a later date because we're slightly running behind time now. So thanks once again for Kate and Liz, and they'll also be in the group session later. So if they're in your group, you might be able to pick their brains again. So next up is to officially announce our 9 new champions. And I'm also delighted that a number of champions who will be coming on board later on in the year are also joining us today. So they will be in some of the discussion groups later, so hopefully they'll make themselves known. So firstly, a big welcome to 5 of our champions. Deb, who's an occupational therapist. Jodie, who's a fitness trainer and we've done some work with in the past. Helen, who I know has been engaged in the some of the work over in Eastbourne. Laurie, who is a yoga therapist, and Sarah, who is also a personal trainer. So the links to all their bios will be sent out post-event, and we'll be putting them up on our website. So once we've sent that out, please go take a look at their full bios and their journey into being physically active. And now I'm delighted to introduce 4 of our other champions. Up first, we have Karen. Are you there, Karen?
I am. Do I come onto video? Yeah.
Yeah, if you'd like to.
Hello, this is
fantastic. Hi, Karen.
I'm 58 years old. I've always been involved in sport. I've got 2 stepdaughters and 4 daughters of my own, so I know about the issues with sport, but also I was diagnosed with MS 20 years ago. So I'm really passionate about sport. I'm passionate about making sure young women are involved in sport. I'm passionate about keeping involved in sport no matter what your age and what your condition, whether you've got a long-term condition or, you know, we're all at an age now where it's called, you know, we're in that age bracket, some of us, where all our health starts to have little hiccups, and it's about continuing your journey in sport irrespective of what your condition is. So it's that adaptive things that you need to do just to keep moving and keep being part of the sporting community.
Fantastic, thank you, Karen, that was great. And if I could ask Maisie and Cleo.
Hello, can you hear us?
I can hear you, can't see you. It's up to you whether you want to put your camera on or not.
I think we're just trying to pop it on now.
That's all right.
Don't think it's going to come on.
That's all right, no worries.
We haven't used my laptop before, sorry.
No, it's fine, don't worry.
I'm Cleo and I'm Maisie and we're from Maisie Cleo Fit on Instagram. So we've both been into sports since we were, well, from a young age, and when we went into secondary school, that's when we started hitting the gym. And initially we were working out for appearance purposes, tried in multiple fad diets and weight loss.
Yeah, I mean, definitely from my point of view, I was so focused on being skinny and had quite an unhealthy relationship with food when I was younger. But now with getting into the gym and also meeting Maisie and going to the gym together, we have just completely flipped our mindset and our relationship with exercise, and we found such empowerment from weightlifting and from feeling strong, and we just want to share that with all other girls, and just we want to share how we feel because it's the most amazing feeling ever. We want to help girls not feel embarrassed. We want them to feel like they belong in the gym and like they belong in the weightlifting section, because we feel like there is quite a big stigma around girls weightlifting, and it's seen as a fairly manly sport. But we really want to change that, and we really want to encourage other girls and show them that it's really cool.
And this is definitely such a perfect opportunity to do so, and we are just so excited to get involved.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, ladies. And finally, Samina.
Can you guys hear and see me?
Yay, fantastic, brilliant. Technology's working. Brilliant, over to you.
Thank you. So hi everyone, my name is Samina. I live in Crawley, West Sussex. So initially, actually, I grew up in the States and was really active growing up, rollerblading around the block, joining every extracurricular activity possible. But when I was 16, we actually moved back to the UK, and that's when things kind of really changed for me. So in the States, you have a club for pretty much everything. And I say I was part of lots of clubs, but actually I was never good at sport. But that was never really a barrier for me. And then the older I was getting, at home, I had a lot of pressure to focus more on my studies, and being from a South Asian background, we like education, it always is your primary focus, and everything kind of gets pushed back to secondary. So in turn, it meant that actually I completely stopped exercising up until about 5 years ago. So I signed up to a Learn to Run program. I was approaching my 30s, really wanted to, you know, become more fit and active, especially because, you know, coming from an Asian family, there are so many health conditions in my family. And yeah, so it was a really hard time in my life. Signed up to this Learn to Run program, absolutely loved it. And it really was a form of therapy for me. So I really wanted to share the love and passion I had about running with everyone else. So alongside my career, qualified as a run coach, I now volunteer with a local running club, but also have kicked off my own ladies only bootcamp. So I'm really keen and passionate about challenging those stereotypes within BAME communities and using my training, you know, to tackle and encourage women from all backgrounds to feel safe and confident about exercise.
I'm muted again, so I've made it. That's fantastic, thank you. Was there anything you wanted to expand on around you co-founded Welfare Society as well?
Yeah.
Oh, you've just gone on mute.
I think I thought I was on mute and then went to unmute myself. Yeah, so early on in the pandemic, actually, myself and a few family members came together and decided actually we wanted to start an organisation, particularly for the Kashmiri South Asian community here in Crawley, just to look after the well-being and welfare of them. And that kind of is anything. So I'm quite passionate about, you know, people being fit and active. So I've been in talks with Active Sussex and a local running club, and we are starting a walking programme post-pandemic. So I think actually now, because of the news on Monday, we should be able to kick off hopefully soonish. So yeah, so that's the Southern Welfare Society, and I'll be delivering a walking programme for the elderly.
Fantastic, thank you so much, Samina. So thank you all for sharing your stories. As I said, the bios of those four lovely ladies will also be up on our website as well, and they'll also be in the discussion group. So do have a chat with them in a little bit. I think that all four of you have probably already made an impact on many women around you, and I'm sure you will continue to inspire many others to get moving more. And I just want to say thank you to you and the others and all those that have applied to be a champion, because you are really going to help to inspire many more people. So now I'm going to pass over to Carrie, who is going to speak to our This Girl Can Sussex Ambassadors.
Thanks, Gemma. Hi, I'm Carrie. I'm the PR and Communications Officer, as Gemma mentioned at the beginning of the session. So up next, we'll be speaking to our fabulous This Girl Can Sussex Ambassadors. Tess Agnew has been working with us since 2015 and when the campaign launched, and we were delighted to announce Zoe Ward as our second ambassador at the end of last year. So we asked you to send your questions for our ambassadors prior to the session. So thank you to everyone who sent questions to us. And we won't be able to get to all of them, unfortunately, because we are limited on time, but Tess and Zoe will now respond to some of them and provide some of their thoughts from their own experiences. So Tess and Zoe, I don't know if you want to put your videos on and make sure you're unmuted.
Hello.
Hello. So first question is going to be to Tess. I don't think I can see you, Tess, actually.
Yeah, I thought I started.
Oh, there you are. So Tess, I see you've tried several different sports as part of your ambassador role with Active Sussex. What would you say deliverers need to think about when trying to engage with females who have never tried their sport or activity before?
So yeah, so it's a massive question for me, but I'm going to draw on my own experience. So I think, and this kind of echoes what Kate was saying earlier, I think to not focus on the actual fitness element of it. So don't focus on the fitness and the physical activity and the fact that you're basically exerting yourself, and focus on all the other benefits of whatever it is that you're promoting, your activity, your club, your sport, like mental health, the mental health benefits, the community, the focus and the mental clarity that you get after a workout, the fire in your belly after you've done any sort of exercise. It's the best drug in the world. And I really want to help people understand that. And I think the journey that a lot of people, women, go on, me included, is same as Maisie and Cleo. You're in search of like that perfect body. I must get slim, and I'm not happy with my body. I've got body confidence issues, and I'm not happy in myself and with my fitness levels. But then if you get over that, and you get over that imposter syndrome to actually just have the confidence to try something new, you realize that all of those fears, they really are not worth your attention. So I would say to providers to focus on getting that kind of feeling and tapping into those anxieties that people have, that makes them feel like they don't belong, and then hitting them with some killer content to make them realize that they do. So your best assets to talk about your activities are the people who are already doing it. So tap into your networks, talk to your members and your participants at the moment, talk to your communities that you want to reach, find out what their barriers are, talk to your members and find out why they keep coming to your activities, what they love about it, what benefits they're seeing, what's the other side effects of actually just being a bit fitter and a bit healthier, and use those as the messaging that you put out to people. And I think that will hit more of a note to kind of get people into that space. I think especially this year with mental health, the benefits of exercise and mental health, it's really brought it to the forefront. So I think now is the time to really tap into that.
Yeah, it's a really, really good point there. Zoe, your story is really inspiring, especially to take the plunge from being an accountant to full-time fitness instructor. How easy did you find this jump? And do you think your own life experiences have helped you to build a rapport with your participants?
Well, quitting my job 2 months before a pandemic was announced was not my smartest move, but I've never looked back. I will shout from the hills that fitness has literally changed my life. I wasn't active as a child. I hated PE, but I actually had really bad postnatal depression and anxiety after my daughter. And I found an exercise class, went along, and literally it changed my life. It took me away from the situation that was stressful. I could think of nothing else but following that instructor, and I just became hooked on that. And then I went to a meeting with Active Rother, and Adrian suggested, have you ever considered becoming a fitness instructor? And he planted the seed, and from that moment on I would sit at work doing accounts with headphones in, planning choreography, planning classes in my head, and I just knew that I had to do it. So I've never looked back. So the jump was quite smooth for me. It was a gamble, but I never looked back. And with regards to life experience, absolutely, I'm no different to anyone else that comes to my class. We're all mainly all working mums. We're all struggling through this pandemic, trying to homeschool, trying to stay active, trying to keep a hold on our mental health. It's just like we're just a big team. And actually,
3 of the clients that come to my classes have now gone on to become instructors themselves. So yeah, it's just changed my life really, and I'll shout it from the hills.
Yeah.
That's really amazing. Okay, back to Tess. So specifically related to your love of cycling, what do you feel are the differences between women riding bikes and women racing bikes? We see some great success stories through British Cycling's Breeze programme, but perhaps less women and girls engagement in competitive cycling. I think this would be a really interesting topic to shed some light on.
I could talk about this for hours, but I've only got 2 minutes, so I'll be quick. I think the main difference between women who ride bikes and women who race bikes is the fact that a lot of women who might look at racing as something that doesn't belong to them, they might have stopped cycling as teenagers. So with Breeze in particular, we see a lot of women coming in who they either haven't ridden ever, or they haven't ridden since they were teenagers or children. And they've kind of lost that love of cycling and that joy. So whereas if you look at the women and the girls who race, they've not stopped at all. They've carried on all through life, a lot of them anyway, and joined clubs and things like that. And I think Breeze, I call it the gateway drug. I keep saying drugs, I don't know why, but I think it's the gateway drug to all sorts of cycling, because it can give you that confidence to get to be confident on the road. And then once you're confident on the road with your bike and you're using it for active travel and you're empowered in that way, you then might be more empowered to join a club. And then as soon as you join a club, all of the other stuff opens up, which I never knew anything about, all the time trials and the racing and stuff like that. I think if we want to get more women racing, we really need to it goes back to breaking down those barriers that they might feel with seeing something as it's not for them. I don't belong there. I'm not fit enough. I'm not fast enough. I don't want to come last. It took me 2.5 seasons. I say half because I'm not counting 2020. 2.5 seasons to muster up the courage to actually get on that start line. And once I did, it was absolutely fine. No one gives a damn how slow you are, as long as you're not in the way. And yeah, you will get lapped, and that's absolutely fine. And I think for me, I really want to help people realize that if you can just get over that first barrier, just putting your foot in the door of the exercise class, the cycling, the whatever it is that you're doing, once you've done that bit, everything else falls into place, and you realize actually it's not as scary as it seems. So Phil, I want to talk to you about cycling later on, because I think, yeah, I'd love to get more women racing. But I think if we can take some of the elements of Breeze's inclusivity and welcome pack and bring that into racing, then I think that would help a lot. So having more of an induction process, and also kind of focusing on the content that you're putting out to people to try and help them realize how it works as well. How does the racing work and things like that? Because I think a lot of it's just like this thing over here that no one really knows about. So demystifying it is a big thing, I think.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And like seeing yourself in those groups. It's really important.
I just need to plug myself in. Sorry, guys.
Okay, so on to Zoe. So do you get referrals from health professionals into your postnatal fitness and pelvic floor exercise sessions? If so, what impact has it made to those individuals? Do you think there are more opportunities to connect with health service professionals in terms of providing an alternative service to women via physical activity to reduce NHS referrals and reliance?
Yeah, so this is a big one. Before COVID, I did a lot of work with Bexhill Primary Network, and I did actually start to receive some GP referrals. Obviously, COVID has hit, and they're now obviously focusing on getting everybody vaccinated. So that's not happening at the moment, but I'm confident, and I'm still in contact with them that after COVID, it will happen again. In terms of the changes that it's made to people's lives, it's massive. I mean, if you're a woman and you're living with pelvic health dysfunction of any sort, it impacts your life in every single way. I've had young women come to the classes that have known that something's wrong, but not quite known what, and not wanted to discuss it with people, and have actually gone on to have surgery following the classes, because we talk about it in such a normal way, and they come away thinking, actually, no, I need to go and see a GP. I'm confident now that I know what it is, need to go and sort it. And it's making a massive difference. Even down to women that I've had one lady that was actually homeless, and she was put into temporary accommodation with 5 other men, all sharing one toilet. And it was awful. She didn't go for a walk. She couldn't go anywhere. Everywhere she went, she had to wear a long coat because she was suffering so badly with pelvic health. And just having a chat with somebody and realizing that she's not the only one has now enabled her to have the confidence to go to her GP. And she's also now under treatment at the hospital and just feeling more confident to get out walking and living her normal life. So yeah, it makes a massive difference to women, and I'm confident that in the future we can build more relationships with the NHS and the local authorities around here. Yes,
definitely. Just, we're running out of time a little bit, but I'm just following on from that question and your answer. Do you think, this is to both of you actually, do you think there needs to be more awareness and training to support coaches and providers to understand how life changes, pre and postnatal, menopause, etc., can affect a female's engagement with physical activity?
I think it needs to start at school, from when you first learn about your menstrual cycle. I'm 34 years old and I've only just started cycle tracking. This is a revelation to me. So I think it needs to start much, much earlier. I don't know about you, Zoe.
This is something that is so passionate to me. I mean, I'm a mum of 3. I'm well aware of the issues that women have when it comes to exercising. So yeah, it needs to be taught to everybody. I mean, I think it is taught when you do your personal training, you do learn basics, but just have an understanding of the changes in lives and how women actually feel about exercise with those conditions, or how, definitely.
Yeah, totally. Thank you both, Tess and Zoe, for your thoughts. You provided some really valuable insight there, which I think will be really beneficial to the whole group. Back to you, Gemma.
Thank you so much. That was really great. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use the next 20 minutes for you to get into small groups and share your own experiences, and also just provide some reflections from all of our speakers, so the presentations from the champions and what Tess and Zoe have just spoken about as well. And also it gives you an opportunity to tell us what you think and how you think the new This Girl Can Sussex network can help more women and girls get moving in Sussex. So you've been allocated a facilitator who's got a couple of questions to cover. So Ed will start putting you into groups, and do I need to unshare my screen? There we go. And you will move into groups shortly. Everyone should be back with us now. Fantastic. So welcome back. I think some of you probably saw me pop into a few groups because I was just really interested to hear what discussions were taking place. And yeah, it was really fantastic to hear some of those discussions. I hope you found this a really useful opportunity. And I heard that there was a few comments around some of the learnings from earlier on in the network event. So that's really fantastic that it's kind of pulled through across the whole day. So as you're probably aware, we are running out of time slightly, so I'm only going to ask for a couple of facilitators to feedback some really short feedback. So yeah, we won't be able to get around to every group, but we have asked the facilitators and some note takers to take some notes from your discussions, and what we'll do is we'll pull that all together into a summary document, which we'll share with you and the wider network post-event. And that will also help in terms of the network. So if I could ask Tess, are you there, Tess?
Yeah, I am.
Could you just give me a couple of points from your group?
Yeah, so we were talking about how to adapt to coming out of COVID and being able to enabling people basically to make that move from coming out of their living rooms doing their home workouts, if they are even doing that, to moving back into exercising in person with people. We discussed some normalising sort of issues around discussing like menstrual cycles and pelvic floor issues, and how to get more coaching, help more coaches comfortable with dealing with those and accommodating people's issues. But yeah, mostly we were talking about just this switch from kind of online life back into normal, and how to kind of best make that. There's some interesting points about how girls, Henry made some extra interesting points about how girls have preferred to exercise online because they don't have to be seen and it's quite anonymous, and the body confidence issues are kind of out the window a little bit. So that was really interesting. So yeah, I think the transition out of COVID was the main thing.
Brilliant, thank you, Tess. And Claire Ryan, who is one of our trustees.
Hi there.
Hello.
How are you? All good, thanks. We had lots of interesting and varied conversations. So we were talking about influencers, for example. One of the school children earlier today was talking about how Love Island and how the pressure of watching people on Love Island with their perfect bodies perhaps prevents them. So we were talking about the power of positive role models, for example, like the This Girl Can ambassadors. And one of the examples that was given was introducing yoga for teenage girls in particular, as something that they've seen influencers do, and actually something they may engage with more than other sports activities. So just trying different things that people will engage with more. We also talked about the challenges of the care model, that where women typically would be the mums and the chefs and the care providers, and there's an awful lot of reasons why they can't prioritize their own fitness and would step away from that. So we talked about how to engage with groups in the communities and just keep that going.
Brilliant, thank you so much. And finally, Kate, if you could feedback from your group a couple of points, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, similarly, we talked, we sort of picked up on what Zoe had been saying, because she was in our group, about pelvic health and about how that needed to be talked about much, much more, so that women knew what was common but not normal, when things could be done, and therefore it's linked into activity. And it had reflected something that actually we've been talking about in the campaign earlier in the day. So that's something we will be focusing on. We talked about the need to emphasise the fun aspect of it. So Carol was saying that with COGS, it was the fun, enjoyable, no pressure, no competition aspect that got women involved, and how really dialing up that and focusing on that to get women along in the first place was really important. And then finally, we sort of got into a discussion around the impact of the pandemic on doing things outdoors and staying outdoors, perhaps even when halls and leisure centres are open again. Actually, people have enjoyed when they have been able to be outdoors together, or maybe being able to build on that a bit more and doing things in unusual settings. And yeah, hula hooping in Bexley every Sunday, apparently, or Bexhill, sorry, every Sunday is the place to be. So I'm going to get my hoop and travel down there when I'm allowed.
Fantastic, that's brilliant, thank you. And yeah, like I said, I'm sure there was much fantastic discussions going on all the groups, so please feel free to carry on putting some bits in the chat while I wrap up, and we will pull off the chat summary as well. So just kind of leads me to say, really, I hope that you found this session really interesting, and it's given you a good update of where the This Girl Can campaign is nationally, and what we're trying to do locally, and some of the priorities that we probably need to focus on based on the insight, which will hope to address the agenda gap in participation. I'm really grateful to those who have shared their lived experiences today, and now I really kind of a call to action to partners and those on the call to use these learnings from today and help shape kind of your localised approaches, and think about how you can connect with our champions where opportunities arise. As mentioned, we will create a post-event summary to include key points from the discussions, and this will also help to inform a bit of a plan for the network and how we can respond to the needs. So thinking about things like sharing stories, how we use our champions, some training, which we've kind of talked, I think was talked about in some of the groups, and some themed learning events, you know, maybe looking at perimenopause. We're also looking to organise a series of forums throughout the year, and that again will be supported by our ambassadors and champions, and it will focus on these key themes that have been identified today. So again, thank you so much for raising anything in your group discussions. I think there was, you know, talk around teenage girls and puberty, again, maybe around pre-postnatal anxiety, mental health, and I just think, yeah, this is going to be a really great opportunity to address the gender gap. So if you haven't signed up to be a This Girl Can Sussex promoter already, and you want to keep updated with network developments, please do so by visiting our This Girl Can website page. I think Carrie is going to drop the link into the chat box now, but we will forward it to delegates in due course. And it's just a Survey Monkey. You sign up, say if you want to be a promoter. We are also still keen for champions to register their interest and why they want to get involved, and you can do that at the same link, but just being mindful that we will be bringing any new champions on board in phases when that's possible. So finally, I would love for you to share your thoughts from today's session, what key actions you might be planning to take. So use social media. We've got the hashtags This Girl Can Sussex, and please tag Active Sussex so we can see them. And I know there's tremendous work going on across the county already, and some real fantastic role models in our communities that we're probably not aware of. But I really believe that working together and sharing our knowledge and our experiences, we really can create a positive, united movement to inspire more women and girls to get active in Sussex. So all that leaves me to say is a big thank you to our speakers, Kate, Liz, Karen, Maisie, Cleo, Samina, Tess and Zoe, my colleagues Carrie and Nick, who's not on the call, but for their hard work in supporting the creation of this network and pulling the session together, and also the rest of the Active Sussex team and some of our trustees who have supported the group discussions today. And finally, yourselves, thank you so much for joining us today and for all your contributions. We will be sending a post-event follow-up email. It will be sent to all of our attendees, so your feedback is really crucial for us. And we'll also send some further resources, so look out for that over the next few days. So stay safe, stay well, stay active. See you soon.